Welcome to Theories of the Third Kind. My name is Aaron. The other host that's joining me today is Danielson.
Hello.
Now, before we start today's episode, we have a couple of announcements to make.
If you would like to support the show, you could do so by joining our premium subscription service, Supercast.
For $6.66, we don't support Satan, by the way.
We do not.
You get access to our weekly premium audio episodes and access to our back catalog of over 290 premium episodes.
And if you flip that 666 upside down, you get $9.99. For that price, you get all of that, plus premium video episodes and bonus video content.
So you can sign up to that by going to theoriesofthethirdkind.com, clicking on the Supercast button in the middle of the page, or if you just scroll down a little bit, it'll be right there and you can click on it. It'll take you over there and it's easy to sign up, easy to use, easy to do.
Now, if you can't afford a premium membership right now, no worries. You can still help us out by leaving us a written review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a lot.
However, if you don't want to, then that's fine. We just want you guys, girls, aliens, reptilians, chupacabras, demon worshippers, non-demon worshippers, Christians, non-Christians, whoever or whatever you are, to enjoy the show.
Also, just a reminder, this podcast is entirely human-made. No AI were used or harmed in the process other than for the base graphic. And then we throw that into Photoshop, and then we do our miracle work on it, which, if it looks good, it's Aaron's. If it looks like shit, it's mine.
I can't even post anything yet on Instagram where we usually post it because we're still locked out of Instagram. We've been locked out for over a month.
But yeah, people have been saying like they've been messaging us on Instagram to get a hold of us. And we're like,
We don't have access
don't
to
have
it.
access. It's the government.
So that right there is the end of the announcements. So today's episode is over the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I can already hear some of you wondering, hey, didn't you previously do an episode over this? And yes, this was a premium episode way back in 2020 or 2021 that we did. And since then, we have completely redone the research. We've added new information, we've updated information, and we included a lot more recent stuff, especially the stuff involving Epstein.
Ooh.
So, what you're going to get is an entirely brand new episode than what was originally aired back 6 years ago. So, with that being said, let's get into today's episode.
All right. So to understand everything we're about to talk about, we first have to look at the foundation itself. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the largest private foundation in the world. And we're not talking small money. It has over $46 billion in assets. That's more than the GDP of some countries. $46 billion.
Now, what does this foundation do exactly? Well, the foundation's official statement is to, and we quote, improve healthcare, reduce extreme poverty, and expand access to education across the globe.
Now, on paper, that sounds pretty noble. You got vaccines, disease prevention, school systems, agriculture, public health, all those things, in theory, benefit humanity.
But whenever you combine massive wealth with global influence, questions start to follow. And over the years, whispers have circulated.
Some people wonder, were vaccination programs in Africa simply humanitarian? Or was something else being studied behind the scenes?
Why are there photos of Bill Gates with Jeffrey Epstein? And why is Bill Gates in Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs and inside of his emails?
Bill Gates presents himself as a soft spoken tech genius turned philanthropist, focused on solving global problems. But then some people wonder, is that the full picture? Or is there more going on beneath the surface?
Now, before we jump to conclusions, we need context. Because if we're going to examine the foundation itself, we first have to understand the people behind it. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about Bill Gates, who he is, where he came from, how he built his fortune, and how he went from running Microsoft to running the largest private organization in the entire world.
So, William Henry Gates III was born on October 28, 1955, in Seattle, Washington. Now, Bill didn't exactly grow up struggling. His father, William Gates Sr., was a successful lawyer. His mother, Mary Maxwell Gates, was a teacher who later served on multiple corporate boards, including First Interstate Bank in Seattle, a bank that had actually been founded by her grandfather.
So, from the very beginning, Bill Gates was raised in an environment of money, education, and connections. So, it's safe to say that he didn't start from nothing. He's always had something.
Now, at 13 years old, Bill was enrolled in Lakeside School, an elite preparatory school in Seattle. And this is where things start to get interesting. A local computer company offered the school free computer time for students.
Now, keep in mind, this was the late 1960s, early 1970s. Computers were not common. They were expensive, pretty big, and most teenagers didn't have access to them. But Bill did, and he became obsessed with them.
He spent most of his free time in that computer lab with his high school friend, Paul Allen. But they weren't just playing on those computers, they were writing code, experimenting, and testing ideas.
Now, at one point, Paul and Bill, they discovered a glitch in their school's computer system. And this glitch allowed them to obtain free computer time. Now, the school, of course, ended up finding this out, and their privileges were revoked.
Now, instead of being permanently banned, Bill and Paul decided to make the school an offer. They're like, we'll debug your system, we'll fix the very flaw that, we took advantage of, and for that, unban us from, computer time. And the school was like, you know what? Sure, why not? And just like that, they were back in the lab being nerds.
And that paid off because we fast forward to a few years later in 1970. At just 15 years old, Bill and Paul developed a program called Traf-O-Data. Now, this program was able to monitor traffic patterns in Seattle. The both of them ended up selling this program to the government for around $20,000. 3 years later, in 1973, Bill graduated from Lakeside.
Now, that same year, he scored a 1590 out of 1600 on the SAT. And yes, he made sure people knew it. Bitches, I'm smart. I'm Bill Gates. I scored a 1590 out of 1600 on the SAT. What do you think about that?
You want to suck it? That's what he would say.
It's not Microsoft now.
Damn. So, in the fall of 1973, Bill enrolled at Harvard University. Now, originally, he planned to pursue law. He wanted to follow in his, father's footsteps. But that plan didn't last long.
In 1975, Gates saw an opportunity in the emerging personal computer market, and he made a decision that would change everything. So he dropped out of Harvard, and that same year, he and Paul Allen founded Microsoft.
Now, in the beginning, Microsoft wasn't some overnight empire. They struggled. Then, by 1979, the company was grossing around $2.5 million. And at just 23 years old, Bill Gates positioned himself as the head of the company. And from there, things moved fast.
Now, in 1987, Bill met Melinda Ann French at a trade fair in New York. They began dating, and in 1994, they got married. Meanwhile, the computer industry was exploding, getting bigger and bigger.
Apple was building hardware, Intel was building computer chips, and IBM was building machines. But what was Bill Gates building? Well, Microsoft, it focused on software.
His vision was simple: a computer on every desktop in every home. That vision drove Microsoft's dominance.
Over time, Microsoft became one of the most valuable publicly traded companies in the entire world, eventually surpassing a valuation of over $1 trillion. Yes, trillion with a T.
And because of that success, Bill Gates became one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. His net worth surpassed $100 billion. And for years, he ranked among the top 3 richest people in the world.
So when we talk about the Gates Foundation, when we talk about global influence, when we talk about all that power, it all stems from this: a kid with early access to computers, an obsession with software, and a decision to drop out of Harvard at exactly the right time.
So now that we understand where Bill Gates came from, we can move into the next chapter: the foundation itself.
So let's fast forward to the year 1994. During this time, Microsoft was booming. Bill Gates was only 38 years old, and his net worth skyrocketed. He was worth around $12.9 billion at the time, becoming the richest person in the world, which is crazy because Elon Musk, I think, is the Richest person in the world right now, and I think he has, like yes, what the fuck? Estimated between 670 to $850 billion.
Yeah, 857.1 billion is his net worth right now.
He's gonna be the first trillionaire.
He's number 1 in the world today.
Look at the closest one next to him is 255 billion, Larry Page. What do they do with all that money? I know. Children, apparently.
There's no fucking way that he has 11 children.
Are you talking about Elon Musk?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's out there fucking.
Musk, who says he's worried about population collapse, has fathered at least 14 children with 4 women. That's what someone said. Does he have 11 or 4? Either way, we're going to sooner or later have to cover Elon Musk
Chase him down in Austin.
while he's laying in bed.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. And around the same time in 1994, Bill Gates began studying the works of Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. Not Rockefeller. Now, real quick though, when we say that he studied their works, we are not talking about novels or technical manuals that Carnegie or Rockefeller owned. We're talking about how both of those men handled extreme wealth.
Both Carnegie and Rockefeller, they were industry giants. And in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they pretty much just built their wealth dramatically. Carnegie built a steel empire. Rockefeller built Standard Oil. And at one point, Rockefeller was the richest man in modern history. But later on in their lives, both of them shifted hard into philanthropy.
All right, so Andrew Carnegie ended up writing an essay in 1889 called The Gospel of Wealth. And in that essay, he stated, if you become extremely rich, you have a moral obligation to give your money away in a smart, structured way before you die. So he believed the rich should not leave giant inheritances to their kids. The wealthy shouldn't simply hand out money randomly. They should fund institutions that help people help themselves.
So pretty much what he was saying it was instead of giving people cash, that Carnegie, would fund public libraries, universities, cultural institutions, and research centers. His philosophy was basically build ladders so people can climb out of poverty. Don't just throw them money.
Now, John D. Rockefeller took a slightly different approach. He believed in what he called scientific philanthropy. In simple terms, that means treat charity like a business investment. Instead of just donating to causes emotionally, he wanted to measure results.
He funded medical research, public health campaigns, education reform, the eradication of diseases like hookworm in the American South, and a bunch of other things. His philosophy was use wealth to reshape systems, not just relieve suffering temporarily.
So, to sum it up, Carnegie and Rockefeller weren't just rich men who donated money. They created the blueprint for modern mega philanthropy. And Bill Gates appears to have studied the blueprint of that very closely. So shortly after that, Bill Gates decided to use some of his Microsoft stock to create the William H. Gates Foundation.
So we fast forward to the year 2000, and that is when something major happened. Bill and Melinda Gates took three separate family foundations that they had already established and merged them into one. And at the same time, Bill contributed about $5 billion worth of Microsoft stock to his new foundation. And just like that, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was officially formed. So $5 billion of Microsoft stock, three other foundations, all merged into one, creates the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Then, in June of 2006, Bill made another move. On June 15th, he announced that he would be stepping away from his day-to-day role at Microsoft. He said he wanted to shift his focus not to another company, not to politics, but to the foundation itself.
So 10 days later, something even bigger happened. On June 25th, Warren Buffett, who at the time was the richest person in the world, worth around $62 billion, pledged to donate 10 million shares of Berkshire Hathaway Class B stock to the Gates Foundation. Those shares were worth approximately $1.5 billion.
And that wasn't just a one-time gift. Warren Buffett structured it as an ongoing commitment, meaning more shares would be transferred over time.
And with that move, the Gates Foundation instantly became something unprecedented. Two of the wealthiest men in the world were now funneling massive portions of their fortunes into one private organization.
And shortly after that, the foundation began organizing itself more formally. They divided their work into program areas, they set strategic priorities, they developed systems to monitor results, and they built relationships with governments, research institutions, pharmaceutical companies, and international agencies.
This wasn't charity in the traditional case. This was philanthropy operating like a multinational corporation.
And from that point forward, the Gates Foundation wasn't just a foundation. It became one of the most powerful private institutions in global health and development.
And that right there is a summary of who Bill Gates is along with his foundation. However, just like every week, our episode does not stop there because now we're going to get into the strange facts and findings, where we discuss all the weird things that we have uncovered while researching this episode.
So let's talk about our first strange fact and finding, which is called questionable investments. So I know what you're thinking. Oh man, investments. How boring. I don't want to hear about that. Hey, if you want to see true corruption of a company, then you follow the money trail. And that's what we're going to do.
Just so you are all aware, the money that the Gates Foundation gets doesn't just sit in a bank. I mean, not like any of our money sits in a bank, it's not even there. But they invested in certain companies on the stock market so that they can make additional money off of the returns.
All of these investments are available to the public to view in tax returns since they are classified as a charity. Now, before we jump into the investments, let us tell you a quick story that will tie all of this together.
All right, so the Los Angeles Times ran an article in 2007 that told a story about a small 14-month-old boy in Nigeria. This place in Nigeria is where Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation states that they have immunized all the children in the community against polio, measles, and other diseases.
Now, that is great, right? However, that 14-month-old boy is suffering from a respiratory illness now. Almost since birth, he has had respiratory trouble. His neighbors call it the cough.
Now, in that specific town where the little boy lives, a local physician there states that hundreds of oil plants are burning off their excess gas because it is cheaper to do so than to sell it. And that physician also claims that these gases have caused an epidemic of bronchitis in adults and asthma and blurred vision in children.
Now, even though this is happening in that town, the government itself won't allow studies to document the health effects of this gas. But what we do know is that many of the 250 toxic chemicals that the oil plant has in its fumes and soot, they have long been linked to respiratory disease and cancer.
And now you're probably like, why do you bring it up? Well, the majority of the oil plants in that area are owned by the Italian petroleum giant Eni, ENI. And guess who is one of their biggest investors? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
It's invested 423 million into the company responsible for pollution at a major scale and blanketing individuals in that area with harsh chemicals. So it's playing both sides.
So now circling back to the start of this strange fact and finding, we decided to dig into the 2012 tax return of the Gates Foundation and found some questionable investments that contradict their mission statements for what they want to accomplish. For example,
One of the mission statements that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation states is, and I quote, our nutrition efforts focus on delivering proven interventions and developing better tools and strategies for providing pregnant women and young children with the foods and nutrients they need. End quote.
this mission statement seems great, but like we stated earlier, their investments contradict that. $2.2 billion invested into Coca Cola, $871 million invested into McDonald's, $7.8 million invested in Pepsi, and $1.4 million invested in Burger King.
So, yeah, these contradictions due to their investments just continue. Another mission statement from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation states the following: have defined areas in which the endowment will not invest, such as companies whose profit model is centrally tied to corporate activity that they find egregious. End quote. Basically, don't be invested into companies that they find fucked up, is what they're saying.
Again, this mission statement seems great and all. However, their investments again contradict that. 2.4 million invested into G4S, which is an operator of 19 juvenile detention facilities in the United States. $2.5 million invested into DynCorp, which is a military contractor.
And should we keep going? Because I think we should. So the next mission statement that they posted states, and we quote, the foundation believes that, the foundation as in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, believes that climate change is a major issue facing all of us, particularly poor people in developing countries, end quote.
Again, they are contradicting themselves because they have 662 million invested into ExxonMobil, 7.8 million in BP oil,
17.8 million.
17.8 million, 16.3 million in Shell oil, 7.7 million in Arch Coal, and million more in other coal producing companies.
So to sum it up, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have investments in companies that are ranked among the worst U.S. and Canadian polluters, including ConocoPhillips, Dow Chemical Company, and Tyco International Limited. They pollute the earth and completely contradicts what their mission statement says. Also, they have major investments in pharmaceutical companies that hike up the price of drugs so much that the people who need it cannot afford it. Again, playing both sides of the fence.
And we know what you're thinking now, that these foundations invest their money in profitable companies. That is true. However, the Gates Foundation states that in their investment policy that the managers should, and we quote, consider other issues beyond corporate profits, including the values that drive the foundation's work.
Which they don't.
No.
All they care about is money.
So instead of following half of what Carnegie said, they're following pretty much Rockefeller 100%.
Yeah.
Mega philanthropy.
All right, so let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is about scandals. This is where it gets pretty juicy.
Ooh.
So throughout the years, the Gates Foundation has found itself involved in a lot of scandals, specifically scandals involving medical testing or vaccinations. I said it. I said the word vaccinations.
Misinformation. Fuck it.
Not misinformation. We're automatically going to get flagged for misinformation just because we said that word. But hey, we don't make any money off of it anyway.
No. We're locked out of that too.
Yeah, we're locked out of making money as well. All right. So some examples is that in the 2000s, there was a MinAfriVac campaign that was held in Africa.
Now, this MinAfriVac campaign was held specifically in sub-Saharan Africa, which is a region that historically experiences massive seasonal meningitis outbreaks. This campaign developed a meningitis vaccine to help the people in that area.
The people involved in this vaccine development and campaign to vaccinate the individuals there was PATH, which is a global health nonprofit organization, as well as the World Health Organization, the Serum Institute of India, and of course, the Gates Foundation, which, by the way, the majority of the funding came from the Gates Foundation.
Now, once this vaccine was rolled out, organizations then vaccinated, and sometimes forcibly, thousands of African children against meningitis. Shortly after that, between 50 to 500 of those children developed paralysis.
So the people in the area, of course, they got friggin' pissed, rightfully so. Many of them went to the local newspapers and demanded that articles be published about this. And there was plenty of articles, but they were just in the local papers. They were never picked up in any international news. Nobody would touch it, except just those small stories and those small newspapers that were local. But in those local newspapers, there was one quote that stood out. And this quote was, "We are guinea pigs for drug makers."
Yeah.
It's fucked up. All right, so that's one of the scandals. Let's go to the next scandal.
All right, the next one is in 2010. The Gates Foundation funded a trial of a GSK's experimental malaria vaccine, killing 151 African infants and causing serious adverse effects, including paralysis, seizure, and convulsions, to 1,048 of the 5,049 children.
Wow.
That's, ooh.
All right, so the next scandal occurred in 2009. Several schools for tribal children in Telangana, which is the southern state in India, it became a site for observation studies for a cervical cancer vaccine that was administered to thousands of girls between the ages of 9 to 15 years old. The girls were administered the HPV, human papillomavirus vaccine, in 3 rounds that year under the supervision of state health department officials.
The vaccine used was Gardasil. It was administered to around 16,000 girls in the district, many of whom stayed in state government run hostels meant for tribal students. Tragically, months later, many of the students had become ill, and by 2010, 5 of them had died.
And it just keeps getting worse because in 2014, the Gates Foundation funded tests of experimental HPV vaccines developed by GSK. And these were tested on 23,000 young girls in a remote Indian province. Approximately 1,200 of these girls suffered severe side effects, including autoimmune and fertility disorders. And 7 of them tragically passed away.
And GSK is GlaxoSmithKline. I believe I said that right.
It's a pharmaceutical company. Yeah.
Now, the Indian government investigated the deaths and eventually charged the researchers that were funded by the Gates Foundation, stating that they had pressured vulnerable village girls into that trial, bullied parents into silence, forged consent forms, and then refused to render medical care to the injured girls.
Those are some serious accusations.
Yes, especially forging consent forms and then, forcing the girls into that trial, bullying the parents. You better stay quiet.
Yeah. It's fucked up.
Didn't even help them afterwards.
Mm-mm. And just continues because in 2010, Bill Gates pledged $10 billion to the WHO, the World Health Organization. Now, 4 years later, in 2014, Kenya's Catholic Doctors Association accused the World Health Organization of chemically sterilizing millions of unwilling Kenyan women with a phony tetanus vaccine campaign.
Independent labs found the sterility formula in every vaccine tested. And after denying the charges, the World Health Organization finally admitted it had been developing the sterility vaccines for over a decade. Similar accusations came from Tanzania, Nicaragua, Mexico, and the Philippines. Wow.
Damn, they're sterilizing everybody. Seems like a way to control the population,
Yep.
which that's one of our theories, but we'll get to that during our theory section. But let's continue on to our last scandal, which occurred in December of 2012. It was in a small village of Chad, Africa, situated on the edge of the Sahara Desert. 500 children were locked into their school and threatened that if they did not agree to, take this vaccination of a meningitis A vaccine, they would receive no further education.
These children were vaccinated without their parents' knowledge. This vaccine was an unlicensed product still going through the third and fourth phases of testing. Within hours, 106 children began to suffer from headaches, vomiting, severe uncontrollable convulsions, and paralysis.
The children had to wait 1 full week for a doctor to arrive, while the team of vaccinators proceeded to vaccinate others in the village. When the doctor finally came, he could do nothing for the children.
They didn't even have a doctor there to actually.
Nope. Imagine seeing everybody else having like convulsions or paralysis, and you're like, fuck, you're going to stick me with that? No way.
I thought it was doctors giving the shots.
No.
So these guys were.
Researchers for this pharmaceutical company that was funded by the Gates Foundation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, the original report was written in a small local newspaper called La Voix. The newspaper stated that 40 children were finally transferred to a hospital. After being moved around several times, many of these 6 children were finally taken back to their village without a diagnosis, and each family was given a sum of 1,000 euros by the government.
No forms were signed and no documentation was seen. They were informed that their children had not suffered a vaccine injury. The whole vaccine project was run by, of course, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Your child got the vaccine, but, it definitely had nothing to do with the vaccine that they got, severe convulsions and paralysis and, vomiting. They got that all on their own.
So messed up. Speaking of messed up, let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is over the big old elephant in the corner of the room that just keeps hanging around. Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, boy.
So a lot of people want to know, did Bill Gates ever meet or know Jeffrey Epstein? Well, Besides the information that we found out in the Epstein documents that were released in the DOJ files that we went over in last week's episode, we did do some backtracking and found the actual truth. We didn't rely on just those DOJ documents.
So, there is the very famous neurosurgeon named Dr. Melanie Walker. This Dr. Melanie Walker met Jeffrey Epstein in 1992, and when he told her he could get her an audition for a Victoria's Secret modeling job, she became friends with Epstein and ended up living in a New York apartment building which was owned by Epstein.
From 1998 to 1999, Dr. Walker was hired as a science advisor for Epstein's foundation. And side note, this Dr. Walker was introduced to Prince Andrew in 1999 through Epstein's foundation. She ended up getting super close to Prince Andrew, and in 2000, she attended the Queen's Dance of the Decades party at Windsor Castle. And guess who else was there at that same party at Windsor Castle?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Both of them drinking it up with the Queen, rubbing elbows with the elites.
Oh, yeah. And now you're probably asking yourself, what does this have to do with Bill Gates? Well, there's this dude named Boris Nikolic. We talked about him a little bit last week as well. He is a physician who completed his postdoctoral training at Harvard Medical School, where he also served as an assistant professor.
Now, Boris met Dr. Melanie Walker, and she introduced him to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Boris then ended up serving as the chief advisor for science and technology to Bill Gates in the foundation.
And then in 2011, Boris introduced Bill Gates to Jeffrey Epstein. Their first face-to-face meeting between Gates and Epstein took place at Epstein's New York City townhouse.
Now, the meeting is said to have included other associates of Epstein, including Eva Anderson Dubin, who is the former Miss Sweden and is married to hedge fund billionaire Glenn Dubin. So after the hours-long meeting, Epstein then wrote an email to his friends saying, "Bill's great." Epstein also wrote another email to colleagues where he said, "A very attractive Swedish woman and her daughter dropped by, and I ended up staying there quite late."
Now, a few months after that meeting, Gates and Epstein were reportedly spotted conversing at a TED conference in Long Beach, California. After that, in May of 2011, Gates paid another visit to Epstein's Manhattan townhouse.
Now, around this time, the Times newspaper published a photo showing Epstein, Gates, Boris, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and James Staley, who at the time was an executive with JP Morgan. Shortly after that photo was published, the Gates Foundation and JP Morgan began discussions about creating a global charity that would fund healthcare projects in poor countries.
So some of the JP Morgan colleagues were asked by Epstein, who was with them, and they said that he wanted to be involved in the venture. It was then said that Epstein pitched the idea that reportedly that he would solicit donations from his wealthy friends, but that he would receive a 0.3% commission of whatever amount of money he raised. Epstein also said in the meeting to Bill Gates and then the foundation officials that he promised he would unleash hundreds of billions for global health-related work.
Then, in late 2011, Bill Gates sent a team from his foundation to Epstein's home in New York to discuss philanthropy. At this meeting, Epstein told his guests that the crime for which he pleaded guilty to in 2007 was no worse than, and we quote, stealing a bagel. He was charged with Epstein's charge in 2007 was sex trafficking charges. Okay. Stealing a bagel.
That Well, a few months later, another team from the Gates Foundation visited Epstein. During this meeting, Epstein claimed he would get access to trillions of dollars of his clients' money, which would benefit the charity. But the team from the foundation found these claims to be unrealistic and began to doubt Epstein's credibility.
Bill Gates and Epstein met several times afterwards. In March of 2013, Bill Gates flew on Epstein's private plane, the aircraft that has been dubbed the Lolita Express, because it was allegedly used to traffic young girls to his island, which was Little St. James. I say allegedly, but that fucking happened.
It happened. Then in September of 2013, Gates and Epstein met for dinner in New York to discuss philanthropy again. And by the end of 2014, Gates and Epstein barely kept in contact, and the joint charitable fund that was discussed never moved forward. However, two senior officials with the Gates Foundation have kept in touch with Epstein until the late 2017.
Now, if all of that isn't a shocker, get this. You guys remember that Boris Nikolic, the Bill Gates Foundation science advisor, right?
Oh, yeah, Boris.
Yep. Well, right before Epstein, quote unquote, killed himself in jail in 2019, Epstein amended his will and named Boris, who is, of course, Bill Gates' science advisor, as the fallback executor in the event that his primary one is unable to serve. So there you go. That's some crazy shit. And here's a photograph of Jeffrey Epstein in the middle at his Manhattan mansion in 2011. From the left, you got James Stanley, at the time senior JP Morgan executive. You have the former Treasury Secretary, Lawrence Summers, to the right of him. And then you have Jeffrey Epstein, and then, of course, Bill Gates, and then you have Boris on the right.
And of course, Boris did come out to say that I had no idea he added me to the will as an executor.
Yeah, bullshit.
Never talked to me about it. Bitch, you talked to him so much.
Yeah, you did.
Our next strange fact and finding is about Epstein and his ranch. Now, as we were digging around, looking for connections between Epstein and Gates, we stumbled upon something very odd. We learned that Epstein had a huge mansion ranch in New Mexico. And this mansion was 33,000 square feet, and it sat in the middle of the desert on a 10,000-acre plot of land that Epstein owned. Also, he had his own private airstrip to it. This mansion ranch was called the Zorro Ranch.
And here you go. Here's a photograph of it. Very weird.
Why is there a bullseye?
Nobody mentions this. They all mention Little St. James or his New York home, but they never mention this ranch.
I saw in the documents that a couple times they would reference it, but no one really goes into it that much.
Yeah, not many people talk about it, but we're going to get into it a little bit. So, why are we mentioning this ranch of Epstein's? Besides just giving you knowledge, there's additional information that not many people know. On multiple occasions, starting in the early 2000s, it was reported by multiple scientists and businessmen that Epstein told them that he wanted to use his New Mexico ranch as a base where, now get this shit, where women would be inseminated with his sperm and would give birth to his babies. Basically, a breeding factory in New Mexico.
It was his goal to have 20 women at a time be impregnated and stay at his 33,000 square foot mansion. He was also quoted saying that he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating women at his vast New Mexico ranch.
You know, that kind of fits with the stuff we went over last week, that one document where that girl is detailing having her baby taken away from her and how Epstein was trying to say, I want to birth babies with you. Very, very weird stuff. So there were some other reports that surfaced of Epstein saying that, and I quote, efforts shouldn't be put into reducing starvation and providing health care to the poor because doing so increases the risk of overpopulation.
And it doesn't end there. Epstein also told other scientists that he was bankrolling efforts to identify a mysterious particle that might trigger the feeling that someone is watching you, and also that he wanted his head and penis to be frozen.
Wow.
Wow.
I bet that didn't happen.
I mean, it could have.
Could have. I bet he's still alive.
I mean, they have seen supposedly pictures of someone somewhere else that looks like him with a beard.
Yeah, supposedly in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on TikTok as well.
Ukraine.
That's Israel.
They're all connected.
All right, so let's talk about our next strange fact and finding, which is again about Epstein and Bill Gates. So, according to the Wall Street Journal, Jeffrey Epstein became aware that Bill Gates had allegedly had an affair with a young Russian woman years earlier.
The woman, identified in reports as a Russian bridge player named Mila, reportedly met Gates around 2010. And at the time, she was in her 20s and Gates was in his mid 50s.
In 2013, 2 years after the affair, Epstein was introduced to this woman, Mila, and paid for her to attend a software coding school. After she graduated from this school, and while Epstein was attempting to get Gates involved in a project he was pitching, Epstein allegedly sent Bill Gates an email asking to be reimbursed for the cost of Mila's schooling. Yeah, it's weird.
Now, financially speaking, the amount of money involved was small compared to the wealth of either man. But sources told the Journal that the tone of the email carried implication.
The suggestion was that if Bill Gates distanced himself from Epstein, details of this alleged affair could become public. In other words, it was pretty much described as a form of pressure, blackmail.
Blackmail. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a spokesperson for Gates responded by saying that Gates met with Epstein strictly for charity discussions. The spokesperson also stated that after Epstein repeatedly failed to involve Gates in broader business ventures, he attempted to leverage a past personal relationship in order to threaten him. The spokesperson further stated that the Gates did not make the payment Epstein requested.
Now, this alleged email reportedly came after Bill Gates declined to participate in a proposed multi-billion-dollar charitable fund that Epstein was attempting to create in partnership with JP Morgan Chase. That fund would have generated substantial fees for Epstein and potentially help him rehabilitate his public image after his 2008 conviction for soliciting a minor.
It's also been reported that Gates had more than a half a dozen meetings scheduled with Epstein beginning in 2011, and some of those meetings reportedly took place at Epstein's New York residence.
Bill Gates has since said that those meetings were a mistake, and publicly he has described his association with Epstein as something that he deeply regrets. But the facts remain. You know, there were meetings between the two, there were discussions between them, and according to reporting, there may have been an attempt at leverage or blackmail. So they did know each other. They did meet multiple occasions. Bill Gates did fly on to or fly to Epstein's Island. Did fly on the Lolita Express.
Many times.
Yep. So yeah.
Is this the Russian chick that gave him an STD?
Yep.
That Epstein had to help him get medicine for, and Bill Gates tried to get advice on how to slip it to his wife, Melinda?
Which is highly illegal.
Very highly illegal.
Yeah. You shouldn't be fucking around to begin with. You're married, you piece of shit.
Boom. Fuck you.
All right. So, Dan, tell us about this last strange fact and finding.
All right, so our last strange fact and finding is called prison labor. So, as we continue to dig down this rabbit hole, we learn that Bill Gates is directly benefiting from what's commonly seen as a modern loophole to human slavery.
So, what we discovered is that the company Microsoft uses cheap prison labor to manufacture some of its products. And I know what y'all are saying. Prison labor is modern slavery. It is. But how is it legal? Well, Dan's going to tell you how it is so that you can do it yourself.
All right, since I do it myself for my shirt factory. Just kidding. Now, through the 13th Amendment, which prohibited slavery back in 1865, it did not get entirely abolished. This amendment also provides that the government can use it as a punishment for crimes, provided that there's a conviction. Thus, prison labor is, unfortunately, very much legal, according to our Constitution.
So, a lot of these big corporations subcontract different companies to fulfill certain needs rather than doing it themselves. Like Microsoft subcontracting Xmark, a company specializing in product packaging and located in Monroe, Washington. A subsidiary of PAC Services utilizes the services of prisoners around the United States to package Windows CD disks.
So, of course, Microsoft was asked about their use of prison labor to do packaging, and they had a reply. We see this program as something that a number of companies in Washington state have worked with. A lot of public officials believe that this type of program helps to provide valuable work experience for prisoners.
Xmark was asked about its use of prison labor, and they said that they pay its prisoner workers the minimum wage. But that figure is misleading. And why is it misleading? Well, the law authorizes that prisons can deduct the prisoner's wages.
Also, Xmark and other private companies who do this private prison labor do not have to provide the prison workers with any benefits such as health insurance, workers' compensation, or retirement.
Now, looking at all of these statistics that we have, prisons appear to be paying incarcerated people less today than they were in the year 2001. Thanks a lot, Osama bin Laden. The average of the minimum daily wages paid to the prison workers is only 86 cents. That's it, 86 cents a day.
Well, you think that's bad? Just an FYI, South Carolina doesn't pay wages for most regular prison jobs. Same with Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, and Tejas.
Pretty much modern slave labor.
Modern slave labor, yeah.
And Microsoft is complicit in this. All right, so that right there was our last strange fact and finding. And now we're going to move into our theory section and discuss some possible theories surrounding Bill Gates and his foundation. So the first theory we have is called genuine. So what we know is that Bill Gates has made tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars through Microsoft. At a certain point, he's made more money than any one person or family could ever realistically spend. So, this theory states that Bill wanted to give it away in a structured, measurable way, give his money away. The Gates Foundation, which he created, focuses heavily on infectious diseases, vaccine development, global health infrastructure, education reform, and agricultural development. Supporters of this theory argue that Gates is driven by a data oriented mindset, a belief in measurable impact, a desire to solve large scale systematic problems, and also that there's a legacy angle to this entire theory, that he's not just being genuine about, you know, donating this money for the betterment of the world. He wants to leave his legacy. Many ultra wealthy individuals shift towards this charitable donations later in life. It reshapes how history remembers them. Instead of a technical or tech monopolist, the narrative becomes, ooh, he is a global health reformer. And in this theory, the foundation is about impact and legacy instead of illegally vaccinating people in Africa.
I believe this theory to be true at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And then as time went on, he definitely strayed away from that.
Yep.
So as of right now, I'd say no. Could still be, maybe, but no for me.
All right. So what's this next theory?
All right. So this next theory is the strategic tax structuring and wealth preservation theory. This theory is more financial than conspiratorial. Private foundations in the US receive significant tax advantages. Donating large sums into a foundation reduces taxable income. The assets remain invested and can continue growing tax advantage while being distributed over time. Critics of this theory argue foundations allow billionaires to retain indirect control over wealth. Money is technically given away, but still influences markets and policies. It's philanthropy that maintains power rather than relinquishes it. And then this theory doesn't claim sinister motives, just strategic financial planning. So, in other words, you get charitable status, you get influence, and you preserve capital structure.
That's
It's
true,
true.
but I think there's an additional motive behind it as well.
I do it.
What?
I donate so I can do it on my taxes.
Oh, yeah. I thought you said I'd do it.
I do charity so I can take it off of my taxes. Not like I get anything back.
So let's talk about this next theory, which is called policy influence. This theory is more political. So, what we know is that the Gates Foundation gives billions of dollars to organizations like the World Health Organization, global vaccine alliances, education initiatives, and agricultural programs. Now, when you fund programs at that scale that the Gates Foundation does, you inevitably shape priorities of these foundations and these organizations. So, the theory here is that the Bill Gates Foundation gives Bill Gates himself enormous, quote unquote, soft power. Now, he doesn't hold elected office, so he doesn't get none of that political power. But through his funding, through the Gates Foundation funding, he can influence research agendas of these organizations, guide global health strategy, accelerate technologies that he believes in, and shape education systems. Now, critics call this a very specific word that I'm not able to pronounce.
Philanthrocapitalism.
There we go. And it's where private wealth influences public policy without democratic oversight. And supporters say that governments underfund these areas on purpose so that these rich billionaires can step in and get power. Either way, the foundation, the Bill Gates Foundation, has become a vehicle of global influence, whether Bill Gates meant for it to or not, which I believe he did mean for it to become that.
People do this with hospitals.
Oh, absolutely.
They fund the hospitals, give so much money. So if any medical needs come up, they are top priority because they are a person that funds them. So if there's someone really sick, hey, this person funding us, investing in us, they need a room. Kick that person out, let them have it. That shit happens in hospitals all the time.
It's fucked up.
It is. Now, our last theory is called Corporation Covered Up. This theory goes on to say that the world is being sold a myth that private philanthropy holds many of the solutions to the world's problems, when in fact it is pushing the world in many wrong directions. The Gates Foundation is being allowed to speak too loudly, and too many actors in international development are falling into line with the foundation's misguided priorities. The Gates Foundation uses its massive financial clout to silence international development experts and groups which would criticize its practices. Bill Gates, who has regular access to world leaders and is in effect personally bankrolling hundreds of universities, international organizations, NGOs, and media outlets, has become the single most influential voice in international development. The Gates Foundation appears to be a massive, vertically integrated multinational corporation controlling every step in a supply chain that reaches from its Seattle based boardroom to millions of end users in the villages of African and South Asia. Yes.
Yeah.
And I have proof of that, I believe.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
There was a corporation called Alice S Corporation, which they had like patents on like certain technology type things. And I believe that Bill Gates was part of like funding them, but then they end up filing like bankruptcy. And there's emails about it if you look it up in the Epstein files that they decided to, or they started going bankrupt, that it came up and Bill Gates is just like, oh shit, what about my covered letter over it and all that stuff? Do I need to say something? Should I put something out? And I forgot who the person he was talking to. They're just like, no, no, no. We'll just keep an eye on it, and we'll just try to minimize anything else coming from it, so it doesn't look like you're like too involved with it and all that. Which honestly seems like this theory, corporation covered up. It's like you have money and all that stuff. We'll find a way to cover it up, keep it silent, so you don't seem to have any hand in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm personally going to go with it's all of these. At the start, it was genuine. He truly wanted to do good for the world and for the human race. However, as it evolved, he noticed that, oh, wow, with this large amount of money, I can create a large amount of influence. And I don't even need to be elected as a politician. People listen to me because I donate money to them. And he also learned, like, hey, it's a way to preserve my wealth. It's a way to not have to pay taxes. And it's a way to influence policies and pretty much shape the world how I want it to be. I don't have to be a part of the Illuminati and sit in a dark room around candles and talk to like 13 other men that are in robes who supposedly control the world. I don't have to do that. I just have to create a foundation that's bankrolling everything, and then I can control the world. I can be one of the elites. And that's what it has become and how it became that. That's what I truly believe.
I mean, I'm right there with you. And I just want to throw in one bonus email that I did find between Jeffrey Epstein and Boris Nikolic.
Okay.
So it starts off with like an email from Jeffrey Epstein, I guess, replying back to Boris. Structuring your position with Bill has an outside as well as a practical component. I would like to have you have a more serious title, especially since it won't carry with it any money. You should be a special limited partner of David's fund. Blank, do you know if Bill got a chance to read the info I gave him? And then, of course, Boris emails back, sorry, forgot to comment. What kind of title would you suggest that I have? So this is Jeffrey Epstein saying that Boris needs to have a really high title in Bill Gates's stuff. And the titles that he suggested, president of Bill Gates Investments, or president of Bill Gates Interest, or president of Bill Gates Holdings. And Boris is like, I could try, but this one might be even harder than trying to get a higher salary, which Boris did get a higher salary from Bill Gates and even tried to convince Bill Gates to buy him an $11 million mansion in New York, which the salary happened, but the mansion did not happen. But Bill Gates did say that if it was around 2 to 3 million, maybe he could have done something.
That's crazy. The average US citizen is sitting over here struggling to pay for groceries, and you got Bill Gates just handing out 2 to 3 million for a home.
I'm over here comparing chicken thighs to chicken breasts and prices per pound. Ramen, chicken ramen, or beef ramen? Oh, they're both the same price.
Yeah, I like beef ramen.
I like beef ramen, and I found out that soy sauce ramen had more sodium. And I'm just like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if anything, I agree with everything you said though. Like, cause genuine, I believe at first it might have started off like that. Money corrupts, and then power. With money comes power. Power corrupts them even more. Then, of course, you're funding a lot of these medical research things. They need guinea pigs.
Mhm.
They went to Africa. They found some. Unfortunately, that's how it was. And nothing happened. They got away with it all, except some of the researchers that did get charged.
Yeah.
But the funders did not. The philanthropists. Honestly, a lot of cover ups, policy influence, strategic tax structuring. You get write offs for donating. So when you donate a lot of money to these charities, you get to write it off.
Well, we would love to hear from you. If you or a loved one have interacted with Bill Gates, or you have a personal story, or you just want to tell us that you love us or you hate us, comment down below on our YouTube channel, or you can send us an email to Aaron, Aaron, at Theories of the Third Kind, or Dan, Dan, at theoriesofthethirdkind.com. And we will love to hear from you.
That's right. We will read your emails
Hmm.
and your comments. Even if they do hurt us, we might cry.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be nice, please. All right. Well, with that being said, do you have anything else you would like to add to today's episode, Dan?
Nope. I do not. Still not a fan of Bill Gates. Still don't like Microsoft Windows.
Yeah, Windows sucks.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it's on most computers. So
But with that being said, I want to thank you for joining us today. And again, thank you for your support and love. Without you, we could not do this.
that's right. Much love.
So, Dan, would you like to roll us out?
Sure will. It's okay to be out of this world with your thoughts.
Because you are not alone.